Welcome to this week's edition of A World Crisis Radio. And this is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. And I am your First Amendment champion. I am your point man when it comes to the First Amendment in these troubled times when attempts are afoot everywhere to chill and to intimidate and to muzzle independent investigative journalism, political opposition, and everything that goes with that. Now, this week we have an astonishing array of scandals, and these include Briefing Gate. What happened in that briefing from the Directorate of National Intelligence to the Republican candidate? Briefing Gate. We have Aleppo Gate, the sad fate of the Libertarian nominee who was not up to speed. And apparently, I don't know, with those guys, are they too busy counting their money to look at the world? We have Cough Gate. Cough Gate. Woe to those who cough. Watch out. Clear your throat, and you may be taken away. That's another big one, right? The paranoid right is big on Cough Gate. And then we have another one, which is Earbud Gate or Earpiece Gate. We've got that one going too. So everybody's falling like 10 pins here in Washington, D.C., and not only there. Now, let's do, I suppose we ought to do Earbud Gate or Earpiece Gate. We have a posting up here, which, gosh, if I can just find this. Here we go. We've got it. Or do we? The Earpiece Gate, it takes the form of a release by WikiLeaks. You'll remember Julian Assange. Sometimes he feels like a blonde. Sometimes he doesn't. But Julian Assange, as of a couple of days ago, had been promising that next week he would begin the implacable drip, drip, drip of derogatory news stories, document dumps, and other stuff about Mrs. Clinton. And before I even tell you what we have today, I have to remind you, if you listen to my other program, the American System Network, I spent a good 10 minutes on how a limited hangout artist or his staff, right, because no individual does these things, right? This is a big operation, takes a lot of stuff. How people who are trying to inflict another limited hangout on the world in the tradition of Paolo Sarpi of Venice in the early 1600s, they need to carefully screen, carefully vet. They have to remove all kinds of material from their document cache, from their document dump. But they also include material which is forged. Forgeries go in there. And of course, the useful idiots. This is now a term that's been brought back into play as of one of the cable news networks yesterday. I think it might have been MSNBC. The old phrase from Lenin, right? Certain people are useful idiots. This is now back. Useful idiots, of course, believe whatever the angelic Assange is willing to dump on them, right? So this is a very, very bad idea. I was warning the American people last night. Go look at it. It's posted that a lot of that stuff is forged. It's doctored. And what do we have today? WikiLeaks, that is to say on Twitter, at WikiLeaks. Their comment is, emails show Huma Abedin in charge of Hillary Clinton's earpiece. And the place you can find that is wikileaks.org/Clinton-emails. So emails show that Hillary Clinton was in charge of her earpiece. My God, it's nothing sacred. So here we see now a logo of WikiLeaks with the somehow the hourglass, right? The clepsydra is going in the wrong direction, like in the old Flash Gordon movies. So we now see an older tweet from Huma Abedin to Hillary Clinton. Date 2009, September 23rd, 6:05. And Huma Abedin at Abedin H at state.gov apparently sends to Hillary Thursday, September 24th, 2009. Did you take your earpiece, or do I need to get it? Did you take your earpiece, or do I need to get it? Question mark. What could it mean? The earpiece. What could an earpiece be? Well, it could be one of these earbuds, right? First thing you do when you go to the United Nations is you've got to have some kind of a headset, earphones, earpiece, earbud, something. There's also the question, could it be one of these modern and actually rather useful, it's like a collar. It's a Bluetooth collar. And it shows that you can hear it hands-free, right? In other words, it could be a hands-free device. So it could be that too. What is it? Well, we don't know, but in retrospect, it seems like this was one of the earpieces that are used, right, that are distributed even at international events, right, like a session of the United Nations or some other event. Now, the other interesting complication here is when they give Huma Abedin's address, at first glance, it looks like Abedin H at, or actually it says copyright. What is this? Copyright state.gov, but it's not gov, it says GOY, G-O-Y. So Abedin H, copyright state.goy, and of course it should be state.gov. So what are we dealing with here? Why? It looks like it's been forged, that somehow the at, right, the ampersand, the at sign used in email addresses has been replaced by a copyright sign, and that at the end it's not G-O-V but G-O-Y. How does this get on the World Historical Scoreboard? It's because some of the, what can we say, paranoid set have, they were looking at the meeting, the Commander-in-Chief Summit held by Mrs. Clinton in the Intrepid aircraft carrier this week, right? Trump, it was actually Hillary Clinton first, half an hour, then Trump, all on the old mothballed Intrepid aircraft carrier, which of course is now this wonderful, highly interesting floating museum. And the meeting was being held on the hangar deck, right under the main takeoff deck, and lots of space. So there were lots of people. And this was the scene of one of the most execrable exercises in modern U.S. journalism, which was Matt Lauer propitiating Trump and going into an attack dog mode on Hillary. What is that? It's the vice of the media who want to keep a fake horse race going, I submit, in order to keep their ratings up. So this is reprehensible. Lauer has done an evil turn to the United States. Back in a minute. This is video from Washington, D.C. Now, if you want to be well informed, day by day, hour by hour, you've got to go to AmericanSystem.tv, AmericanSystem.tv, and please subscribe. I'm appealing to everybody. If I have ever given you material of interest or provided anything out of the ordinary, please now think about reciprocating, at least to some degree, by subscribing to this program over at it's actually not this program, it's the American System Network program over at americansystem.tv. Nominal fee, and get it over there 4 days a week. And we apologize, we meant to go 5 days a week this week, but because of the hectic events, and you can well imagine, we're going to have to hold out on that until next week or so. So what did we have? The story of Earpiece-gate and Earbud-gate. Now, the thing you have to understand about Huma Abedin, she was officially, her job was body woman for Hillary Clinton, and that's a well-established function in the the lore of political campaigns. It is simply that there's so much pressure on the candidate that the candidate cannot be expected to do things like go and buy toothpaste or find the bathroom or any of other things, right? Get a Coke or whatever it is, so that the idea that Huma Abedin would be writing to Hillary Clinton and saying, did you need your earphones or your earpiece? This is nothing very strange. Because that's what she did. That was her job, body woman. I have to tell you, towards the end of the 2008 campaign, 4 years ago, I went down to Daughters of the American Revolution, Constitution Hall, and here was an event which I monitored strictly as a journalist. And here we had Hillary Clinton, we had Terry McAuliffe, we had other stalwarts of the Clinton machine. And I actually, at the end of it, when Mrs. Clinton was shaking hands with her supporters, actually from the stage, I just wanted to stand there and study the interactions of these two. And you could see that Huma Abedin kept close and was there to go and get things. Right? You need a Kleenex. What do you need? Would you like a Coke? All that stuff. So that's what she did. So the paranoids they're in some trouble. The paranoid argument, of course, is that Mrs. Clinton was getting the answers through an earphone. And they had come out of the Intrepid meeting desperate to deflect attention from the substandard performance of the Republican candidate, anxious to deflect discredit and raise all kinds of hobgoblins about Hillary Clinton. And the funny thing about it now is the bitterness, the venom, and the hatred. Because if you go back 12 years ago, you may remember the one where the presidential debate, it was Kerry against George W. Bush the Younger. And in that one, George W. Bush was wearing a kind of light-colored sort of grayish suit with some kinds of checks. And when he turned around, there was some kind of what could you call it? One observer said that looks like his battery pack, that Bush had something in the middle between his shoulder blades that somehow stood out. It was almost flat, but not flat enough to be invisible. So Bush's battery pack, and I thought that was pretty funny, the way I looked at it. There have also been accusations against President Obama that he had some kind of surgery or implant or some, tampering with the back of his head, and that his hairline had been altered and photographs were produced to this effect. And that was already not so lighthearted. And now we have today is simply crazy. Now, there are a couple of other shorter news items. Well, the lesson of the first news item is go and subscribe to The American System. Subscribe to The American System, and you'll know in advance what's going to happen. Because yesterday I said, watch out for Assange with his teasing, and that's going to be a doctored, forged kinds of presentation. Of course, that is inherent in the life of the limited hangout. if you want to get my list of giveaways, right, whereby you can pretty much, well, pretty frequently, most of the time, recognize a limited hanging and distinguish that from an actual leak or something real, a real whistleblower, please go and take a look. Let's try to get rid of Aleppo Gate. Here we have Gary Johnson, right, riding the wave of public dissatisfaction with the two major party candidates. So Gary Johnson, former governor of, New Mexico, goes on Morning Joe with Mika and Scarborough. And Mike Barnacle, you may remember him. He had problems with the, the originality of some of his articles when he worked for the Boston Globe. He is a kind of an orphan of the Kennedy machine that was, but he still goes on. So, and this, in this case, a useful, pertinent question: what are you going to do about Aleppo? And Gary Johnson doesn't know what Aleppo is. Now, I have, I don't like libertarianism. I think it's wrong. I have no animus against Gary Johnson, but I would say, what kind of a country is it where people who are so ignorant and so ill-informed crowd forward to seize hold of the levers of power? How can this be good? We have a kind of a reverse selectivity process going on, reverse vetting. It looks like we're getting the people who know least and have the least emotional maturity and are most dangerous if put in the same room with the nuclear launch codes. Okay, Aleppo Gate. That's Johnson. So who knows what will happen to him, right? Will he get the 15% necessary to be on the stage? I don't know. Certainly, we're in the season where the protest votes loom large. As you get towards that horrible moment of decision, then the protest votes not so attractive, right? When you're looking at the leap into the dark, as we've been saying. If we're going to do Johnson, we've got to do the Tractor Gate. We'll do Tractor Gate and Jill Stein in just a minute. Back on Crisis Radio, and we're going through all the infighting here: Briefing Gate, Aleppo Gate, Cough Gate, Earpiece Gate. Let's take a look. We've done Aleppo Gate. Poor Gary Johnson, not looking too knowledgeable about the world, right? Presidency, big part of it is foreign policy. I guess not for old Gary. Now, there is this protest against the pipeline in North Dakota. Now, in general, as people know, I am in favor of infrastructure. The only way to get out of this depression and prevent a fascist regime in the United States is a massive job creation program. This was the lesson drawn by Anton Erkelenz in Germany pre-1933. He said the only way you cut the fascists off at the knees is by fighting unemployment, creating millions of jobs. There's no argument that will win against a demagogue, but a job will essentially win. It's, if you're actually offering a job. This is another way of saying, if somebody's out there demagoguing issues of cultural populism, of we hate the elites and we're plain folks and all of that, we don't like city slickers, that's cultural populism. That gets you nowhere. That's a blind alley. That's for dupes. But then there's economic populism, and economic populism says, here's a job, here's a healthcare contract, here's a school, here's mass transit for you, here are other benefits, here's how your child can go to college and you won't get crushed. That's economic populism. That's what we want to deal in. But unfortunately, a lot of people can't make the distinction, or they don't want to. So economic populism, yes. Cultural populism, no. Now, we need infrastructure. You can't have economic populism of the kind we absolutely require unless you have an infrastructure program that's going to create a large part of the 30 million new productive jobs that are needed, has to be funded by the Federal Reserve, of course, 0% century bonds, bonds issued by states and other authorities and bought up by the Federal Reserve at 0% 100-year maturities. But being in favor of infrastructure in general and as the indispensable thing for an entire country, it doesn't mean that every place has to get an immediate infrastructure project going. And if it's on one side of the river, maybe it could be on the other side of the river. Or if it's on one side of the county line, it might be on the other side of the county line. Those are not the be-all and end-all questions, right? You got to have flexibility. You've got to take local sensibilities into account. It's not punitive. It's supposed to be a benefit. So help people to see that it's a benefit. Now, those Native American groups have been out there protesting the pipeline for a while, and they have built up a kind of articulated community response, which is agreed on by the main local participants. And as of this week, out comes Jill Stein. And Jill Stein sees this as a publicity stunt, and I don't think too much more. And I've just been listening to an observer who's been looking at this from Minnesota, frankly, and that observer has said that the feeling out there at the protest is that the patient preparation and uniting of forces and creating some kind of a leadership consensus and other things was simply vandalized by outsiders, and I think this must include Jill Stein. And of course, what happened with that was, and this is really shocking, we've had dogs, right, vicious guard dogs, attack dogs, unleashed in the United States on peaceful protesters, right? Nobody really armed, right? Jill Stein, foolish as she was, had a can of spray paint, right? Not the smartest, right? Not smart at all, but that doesn't justify dogs. So it is the private security company, apparently, hired by the private company running this thing, that have done that. And that is absolutely intolerable. No more attack dogs unleashed against Americans. How about a constitutional amendment? No more attack dogs. Now, important issues. Voting. We're headed towards an election, right? Got to pay attention to voting. And what it means is, we've covered in the previous broadcasts that the state officials in Texas and North Carolina, these are Republicans, of course, make no mistake, this is the Republicans. Those Republicans are coming with their eternal bugaboo, their eternal boogeyman, that there's going to be voter fraud. Well, as we know, there's almost no voter fraud. There's vote fraud. And if you want to learn about vote fraud, you got to go ask Karl Rove and his Orca machine of 2012, right? The thing that made him refuse to leave the Fox News set, because he said, nope, there are more votes out there. I guarantee it. I know it for sure because of my Orca machine. This is now the way the election is being decided. If Texas and North Carolina have been defeated, right? And in this case, we read here in the Washington Post, challengers in federal appeals courts have successfully argued to shelve new voting laws passed by Republican legislators in Texas and North Carolina, where courts have found, the finding from the court is that changes would have discriminated against African Americans and Hispanics. And there have also been victories by the pro-voting, right? Facilitate voting. Let people vote. Let the people decide. They have also won victories in Wisconsin and in Washington State. Now, the news today, September 9th, is that civil rights groups have now appeared before the United States Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. The United States Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit is in many ways the most authoritative of all the U.S. circuit courts of appeals, right? It's the second level of the system. You got your basic federal district judges. Those are trial courts. Then you got the appellate level where you have a statutory right to appeal. And then you've got the Supremes where they may take your case or not. But now it is Kansas, the Koch plantation, Alabama, and Georgia who are being put on the hot seat here, grilled, to essentially the issue is, can these states, Kansas, Alabama, Georgia, require proof of citizenship before local people can use a federal form to register to vote? And the charge coming from the civil rights people is this could lead to, quote, mass disenfranchisement of tens of thousands, unquote, of tens of thousands of applicants in the November general election. There's a list, for example, in Kansas, Koch territory. There's 17,000 Kansans whose applications are on hold, and that would be irreparable harm. And this is U.S. Circuit Judge Judith W. Rogers, 1996 Clinton appointee. The applicants are suspended, and we'll get back to this in just a second on World Crisis Radio. AmericanSystem.tv, AmericanSystem.tv. That's a daily 1-hour program, generally posted around 9 o'clock or a little bit later, a little bit after that. Got to be flexible because things do happen. Got to respond to breaking events, among other things. And please go there, subscribe. You want to do something for the First Amendment, want to help me, please do that. That's the best way right now to help me. We will have a legal defense fund soon, but we don't have it today. And today you can just go right on over and make sure that you get this. Essentially, with that, you're going to be getting it 5 days a week, and it'll soon be 6 days a week. And that, I think, will be that'll be an important progress also. So we're looking at the right to vote. The reason for this is important. The permanent austerity dictatorship of the Republican Party involves controlling the presidency, the Senate, the House, and the Supreme Court. And the role of the Supreme Court is to validate outrageous anti-constitutional actions that will prevent trade unions or other organizations, any kind. They don't want them. They want you atomized. They want to pick you off one by one. This is the way tyranny comes. And they don't want you to be able to vote. So they got to make sure that it's inconvenient, that it's hard, that you have to wait, that it's humiliating, and then they're going to kick you out. Example, in Kansas, we've got the 17,000 Kansans whose applications are essentially frozen. They could get irreparable harm. Those guys are on a suspension list of Kansas residents who began but did not complete the registration process in the past 90 days. So the state of Kansas estimates that about 50,000 individual voter applications could be canceled. That's vote fraud, not voter fraud by little people from the bottom up. That's a bad joke. This is vote fraud. So this is going to go on. And we have Judge Stephen F. Williams, a 1986 appointee of Ronald Reagan, says, quote, if you states, right, and this is to Kansas, Alabama, Georgia, if you wanted to find a way to violate the Administrative Procedures Act and invite lawsuits, this is a good way to do it. So this is one of the laws that's involved, right? You're going to use purely bureaucratic administrative means to prevent people from voting. On the 29th, Judge Richard J. Leon had rejected a request to block the enforcement of this, but now the people are back, and so there's going to be back and forth among these judges. Those are some of the ones that are involved. Like the plaintiff's lawyer says, if you're poor, rural, African American, you don't have the money, you don't have the wherewithal to get these fabled picture IDs. So the Kansas Secretary of State, Kobach, he says it's all wonderful, that there's terrible vote fraud. Now, look, in terms of other, big, spectacular, crazy things, this is not confined to the presidential sweepstakes. Here we now have the House of Representatives of the United States wants to impeach the Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service, John Koskinen, Koskinen. And of course, this is the Lois Lerner case, right? That demonized lady. Oh my gosh. She has been put through the ringer. Lois Lerner. What was her infraction? She didn't give the Koch brothers entities their tax exemptions fast enough. In other words, the Tea Party groups that were backed by the Koch brothers and other people like this didn't get their tax exemptions fast enough. They had to wait. Can you imagine? And for the rest of us, to get a tax exemption, you'd be willing to wait a pretty long time, and you'd be pretty happy if it ever came through. But not these people. So the idea is that there's been a terrible crime, a high crime and misdemeanor. Whoa. That's impeachment. And the House can do it, right? Simple majority. Oh my gosh, I'm coughing. Of the House. So who's doing it? 2 members of the House Freedom Caucus. That means the wacko birds. That is the chuckleheads, as they were described. The Tea Party caucus. And it's the House Freedom Caucus. Now, this is John Fleming, Republican, Louisiana. Tim Hoyle's camp, lame duck, huh? He lost his primary. Republican of Kansas filed a motion in July to force a floor vote on Koskinen's impeachment. I guess that's a discharge petition, huh? Strange stuff. Jim Jordan, the head of this Tea Party cabal, says, you think you can get away with that, but you can't. Lois Lerner. Now, the problem is they can't get at Lois Lerner, but they think they can impeach Koskinen. And because he's a federal official, of course, right? So where's this going to go? There are other groups, of course, right? There's the Republican Study Committee, which is that's the most of them are in that one, right? That's the majority one, and then there are a couple of others. There's the Tuesday group, which is sort of liberal, moderate Republicans, and they're all maneuvering like crazy. The point is, if these people, these House Republicans, go ahead and do this, they are harming themselves. I hope they do it because it will expose them. Up to now, of course, everybody's interested in Trump, right? They want to pay attention to Trump. And we've basically lost these House Tea Party extremists from view. But if they go ahead and do this, the impeachment of a federal official, not a very common event, then they will be back in the center of attention, and believe you me, they will not like it. So I say, bring it on. Let them bring it in here, and let them do what they can. Other irony that Koskinen was not on the job when this happened, right? And I think Lois Lerner has quit. I'm sorry. Normally, you should be up to date on every detail of Lois Lerner's life, but life can't do it. But Koskinen, I think, was not there when Lois Lerner carried out her epic constitutional crimes of not giving the Koch people their tax exemption as fast as they wanted it. And of course, the rest of us are waiting for any tax exemption. This is called targeting, right? Targeting means you don't get your tax exemption as fast as you wanted it. Oh, to be targeted. Now, we have got to go on to some important ones now. I think we've done, what have we done? Briefing gate? Well, no, briefing gate we're going to do now. Alepgate, Coughgate. It's ragweed pollen, once again. Ragweed pollen in much of the United States. It's the most irritating kind of pollen. It causes coughing, sneezing, itching, watery eyes. Go and look at the ads that are put on in the middle of the ABC, NBC, and CBS Evening News for a rather older viewership, and you'll see that it's ragweed pollen season. So I don't know what these paranoids think they're going to get with it, but they seem to consistently underline their, I believe, sincere bewilderment with the modern world, its complications, its threats, and all the rest of it. So now, briefing gate, that the Republican candidate got 2 briefings from the office of James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence. And this will be another dramatic segment of our program today. World Crisis Radio back in a minute. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So we've got this panoply of events. And now we've come to the one which I think we can actually classify under 2 headings. We've talked about this in the past. We knew it was coming. You heard it here first. And this is called blurtgate, as in when you blurt something out, when you say something that maybe you were not supposed to say, but you said anyway, you blurt it out. And this involved the secret intelligence briefings being provided to the Republican nominee from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the setting of this, but let's get into this first because it's actually the most important thing. There was this week the debate on national defense, the commander-in-chief debate between Hillary and Trump on the USS Intrepid aircraft carrier. And I'll go through some of the things that were said in that exchange, but I think the most important one is the comment that Trump made about the briefing officers coming from the CIA. Now, these briefing officers are carefully selected CIA personnel. They're not amateurs. You don't agree with their politics, fine. I don't either. But this is what you're going to find is people who are self-confident and know what they're doing. And Trump said, first of all, he was asked, did you learn anything out of these briefings? No, he didn't learn anything. He knew it all in advance. And then, was there anything about it that was of any note? And Trump then started with this idea that he was able to deduce from the body language of the people in the briefing officers, right? The briefing officers coming from Clapper's office and presumably from the CIA side of that, they were comporting themselves, according to Trump, in such a way that you could tell that they were not happy with Obama's leadership, and especially that the Obama White House was not following the advice coming from the intelligence community. Now, there is, at least in theory, there's this distinction that the intelligence community is there to provide intelligence and facts and things that otherwise wouldn't be known, right? If you have a big crisis meeting of the National Security Council or the cabinet, the CIA director goes first and gives an intelligence report. The CIA director is supposedly not a policymaker, but of course, in reality, he is. And this was the subject, for example, of a little-known document, the Harry S. Truman letter of late 1963, December, I think, after the Kennedy assassination. Truman said we should go back to a situation where the CIA is intelligence and nothing but, not operations, because that the operations is where the intelligence and the policy making tend to collide. So Trump says he could tell through his perspicacious analysis of the body language that these people were not happy. Their advice had not been taken. Now, I would say this is about the same level as to say, if I had been in command on 9/11, we would have won a famous victory, and we would have stopped them dead in their tracks, and that guy bin Laden would not have been able to even get off a first action. It is profoundly magical thinking, I must submit. So that's one thing. But then the next day, or within hours, I guess, within hours, NBC News put up an article where they, and you should look at this, right, because this is one of the documents of our time. NBC News says that 4 to 6 present and future government officials of the United States say that there were untoward events in the course of this briefing. There were the one that Trump talked about, and that it went something like this. This is NBC News. What really happened at Donald Trump's intelligence briefing? Now, Ken Dilanian, Dilanian, Robert Windrem, Windrem, and William Arkin. Now, William Arkin is a knowledgeable guy. Right? He's got this book about code words, which has proven to be of much use. I also have to add, the one person that I've ever met, talked to, exchanged opinions with, who was a briefer, was Ray McGovern. Ray McGovern has said repeatedly, I'm not revealing anything. Ray McGovern says that he repeatedly gave intelligence briefing George H.W. Bush the elder. And he held him in high esteem, and he was the CIA briefing officer for that President Bush, right? The elder President Bush. But now, in the course of this thing, we get the NBC article which says, during the course of the briefing, there were 2 people with Trump. That was Chris Christie and General Michael Flynn. General Michael Flynn is a disgruntled military officer who was forced out of his post. I think he was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. If not the head of it, then the number 2, but I think the head. And there was also Chris Christie, because these 2 people have top secret clearance, right? Because they have been in government service, right? DIA chief has to have top secret. And Chris Christie, because of his role in the Justice Department and U.S. attorney and things like this, he's also in it. Top secret clearance. So as this, according to these stories now, and it's you go look at the article, right? Sometimes it's 4 of them say it, sometimes it's 6 of them say it, of these retired government officials speaking off the record, that as the briefing went on, Flynn began to intervene more and more, and Flynn was told finally by Christie, shut up. Christie says to General Flynn, calm down, shut up. That sounds like pure Christie, right? Sit down and shut up. So that's what happened. Let's see now. I think I might be able to get you the exact quote. This is denied by both of them, of course. It happened on August 17th. And, this is where Trump says he's really good at body language, so he can tell what's happening when the rest of us might not be able to. There's no comment from the Director of National Intelligence office. So again, the key words are Flynn, in a heated atmosphere, interrupting the briefing. I don't know, maybe they've edited this stuff out already. Have they taken it away? No, here we go. 4 people with knowledge of the matter told NBC News that one of the advisors Trump brought with him to the meeting, retired General Michael Flynn, repeatedly interrupted the briefing with pointed questions. 2 sources now, 2 out of the 4 or 6, say Christie, the New Jersey governor and Trump advisor, verbally restrained Flynn. One saying Christie told Flynn to shut up. The other reporting he said calm down. 2 other sources say Christie touched Flynn's arm in an effort to get him calmed down and let the briefing continue. Flynn says it's total BS, and Christie says it's a complete work of fiction. He did not make the statement, didn't touch the general's arm, complete work of fiction. But there you have it, chaos. Chaos in the secret councils of government because of the immaturity of these people. Back in a minute. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So we got to go on quickly now. That was Briefing Gate or Blurt Gate. We also need now to talk about the broader context, right? In other words, this national security debate with Trump in it, which is profoundly disturbing. You remember in the course of this event on the carrier Intrepid, Trump opined that Obama had reduced the U.S. generals that he had. The effect of his action was to reduce the generals to rubble. He says, our generals have been reduced to rubble, unquote, by Obama. I think this is an unprecedented affront to the U.S. officer corps. And, of course, opinions are changing on this. Certainly my opinions are changing. This is not Iraq 2003. This is now the United States looking at China in particular in the South China Sea with all of those snubs and insults from last week. That shows hostile intent. And then when we look at Russia, I wonder whether the Russian government is totally homogeneous. In other words, my argument for the United States for several years has been that the United States is profoundly factionalized and that there are in particular military factions who don't like Obama and don't do what he says. And I think that to some extent, McChrystal was an example of that. I think Petraeus was an example of that. I think that's how the Benghazi September surprise against Obama was organized. So I'm wondering whether certain people in the Russian military decide, I'm going to buzz this plane or I'm going to buzz this ship. I wonder whether that happens. People have talked about the collective Putin, right? Not an individual, couldn't be, right? Sitting in the Kremlin with lots and lots of power ministers, right? The Siloviki. And they have some influence. So sometimes the Siloviki are feeling their oats, and they might do this. Now, I'm not assigning a lot of importance to it, right? In the Cold War, we had Crazy Ivan all the time, right? Decade after decade. Seems just to be structural, right? And if you're a pro, you can live with it, keep cool, don't overreact, don't even react at all sometimes. So, but the idea that American generals have been reduced to rubble is an affront. It shows defeatism. It shows, a very, very bad outlook. That they're an embarrassment. That the United States should be embarrassed by the generals we now have. Well, that we're not going to give them a certificate of infallibility. But there we go. Now the stuff about Briefing Gate. We went through. The comment that to the victor belong the spoils, well, at least since the passing of the United Nations Charter in 1945 approximately, that is no longer true. We thought we had reached a higher level of civilization where you simply can't loot, sack, wreck, parasitize a country in that way. You simply can't do it. You can't steal the oil. Then, as I discussed on the other program, how are you going to steal the oil? You're going to have to create an armed enclave, a fortified enclave, and then you've got a pipeline that goes for 3 or 4 or 500 miles. How are you going to defend that? How long is it going to take? And aren't you going to have to rebuild all the refineries? Because by now ISIS has, not paid the upkeep. So wouldn't it be more intelligent to set up a government that would have some legitimacy and then make an oil deal with them? Trump obviously thinks that he can appoint generals and fire them. The idea would be that you'd have a coterie of really mercenary generals who would be loyal to Trump individually rather than to the institutions. They would be, I'm afraid they would be in the tradition of General Wilhelm Keitel, who was in the German army in World War II. Keitel was the guy who represented a total disregard of the rules and the laws of war and a complete willingness to do whatever the authoritarian government there wanted him to do. It's also interesting, we heard from Fareed Zakaria that Putin backed off. He said, I didn't say he was brilliant. I said he was bright or colorful. And we'll try to get the final lowdown from the Slavic language department here. Purge the generals. Important, I think, from Hillary, worthwhile, is that Hillary says very categorically, there will be no ground troops in Iraq. There will be no ground troops. There will be no U.S. ground troops in Iraq or U.S. ground troops in Syria, meaning the big battalions, right? There already are in each case, but that's special forces. This is training. This is not quite the same thing. So that might be something to work with. In other words, if you're looking at the preponderance of the evidence, I think the preponderance of the evidence is going away from the GOP ticket. So there's also a speech from Trump at the, this is about defense and defense economics. And I would say two things about this. One is that Trump comes out against the sequester. Now, you haven't heard about the sequester anywhere but here. I've been on the sequester for 2 or 3 weeks saying we're still under those brutal spending caps, which go back to the Satan sandwich of summer 2011, the super committee of 12 tyrants who could not agree. And then at the point of the fiscal cliff, we had to impose, they imposed, right? The austerity fiends imposed these sequester rules, which actually set maximum figures for all of these categories for the next 10 years. So that is that's no good. Notice Trump says he wants to end the sequester for the Pentagon. Yeah, how about for social services? No, says Trump. He wants to cut those. He wants to cut the personnel and cut the benefits, and that is a monstrosity. The other one is he talks about anti-ballistic missile defense. Well, that is timely. I don't think he has any ideas. I wonder if he even knows what he's talking about. This was a teleprompter speech, okay? This was not an off-the-cuff ad libidem extravaganza. So he's talking about anti-ballistic missile defense. Well, this is timely. The North Korea, the DPRK, has now fired their 5th nuclear test. They're in the range of 10 to 20 kilotons, 3 or 4 times what they had before. So if South Korea wants a THAAD anti-ballistic missile defense, they should have it. That's just the beginning. Back in a minute. If you want to keep up with these fast-moving events in these troubled times, that's going to be easier if you go to americansystem.tv, americansystem.tv. This is actual analysis. This is not the GOP media cartel. It's not part of Breitbart. It's not part of Drudge or World Nut Daily. or any of those, right? It's something quite different. So again, we'll be looking in coming days and weeks about this military speech that Trump gave. But suffice it to say, the entire sequester has got to be removed, not just the cap on Pentagon spending. By all means, remove the cap on Pentagon spending. I'm for it. The world is looking grimmer. We're facing China. We are facing the Anglo-Chinese alliance. This is something quite different. What happens, if a country says that island 650 miles from my coast belongs to me, and there's another country that's so much closer and says, no, that's ridiculous. We're getting back into the kind of international anarchy that preceded World War I, or this mad dash for territorial aggrandizement that was the feature of the early 1950s, if not sooner. So we're getting into that. So I would not simply dismantle, demolish the U.S. Military. The question is, what is the emotional maturity, the stability, the mental stability? And temperament is not enough. Mental stability is the key question. That's got to be provided. Otherwise, the strong military gets you nothing. It just gets you into trouble even quicker. Let me point to positive news from the ISIS front, which, as usual, has been completely suppressed by the U.S. media. Right? Trump gets up there and says, "Well," this is part of his military speech. Trump says, "I did have a secret plan in my pocket here, just like Nixon did. But now, when I get going, I'm going to call together all the generals. I'm going to get them together. And within 30 days, they have to come up with a plan." And then he says, like a good eclectic, right, mixing and matching. He says, "Well, I may take their program, or I may take my program, or I take some of theirs and some of mine and put it together and mix it and marinate and so forth." Right. So this is not very rigorous, and that's one of the problems in military affairs. Right. You can see this again and again. Is that you're just not going to make it if you try to just toss things together like a salad. A military plan has to be organic. It has to be coherent, and it's got to be, of course, realistic, and it cannot reflect some kind of short-term emotional stuff. Now, Ashton Carter, we haven't heard from him. There are two things going on. John Kerry, Secretary of State, is in Moscow, on his way to Moscow, or maybe already on the way back. It's the fourth or fifth time that Kerry has tried, and I think actually in good faith, to get cooperation or to get the details ironed out on this key question of a ceasefire, right? The cessation of hostilities and the cooling off of the Syrian situation. Again, the most important prerequisite: the United States must drop and repudiate this foolish obsession with regime change vis-a-vis Assad. We're sick of regime change, right? The Democratic primaries voted to a large extent against regime change. It's not clear you could get the Republicans to vote for regime change. So that is important, right? And what we're talking about now is the condominium. If the Russians buzz a ship, if they buzz some planes, that does not change the fact that the only way to manage the affairs of this world at this juncture is the condominium. Russia and the U.S., starting in Syria, proceeding to other crisis areas. This is the viable option. It's really foolish. I mean, for Obama to say Russia is a regional power, this is just foolish. And that of course is going to be taken as an affront. Why do that? Right? If you start calling them regional power, then they're going to tell you you're going to wait for 3 hours. Right? Charles Krauthammer today says that the treatment for Obama in the G20, China's ostentatious rudeness reflects the world's general disdain for Obama. Well, there's a limit to the disdain for Obama, and it comes, you can put it on the air and see, people will come forward, that they're happy with Obama, that he didn't start another war. He didn't cave in to baiting like that of the neocon Krauthammer here in the Washington Post, right? He had the maturity to say, I'm not going to let somebody goad me and bait me and con me into starting a world tragedy. By the way, the other thing Trump had was take the oil. Again, this stuff is just, it's just childish. Trump's program in that debate was to say, if Putin says good things about me, I'll say good things about Putin. And as one of the commentators said, that's a good program for getting along in the second grade, but that's not geopolitics. That's not world politics. So I just wanted to note that Ashton Carter in London, a day or two ago, at this international conference called by the British Defense Secretary and the British DOD, they, in this case, Ashton Carter, put out the perspective that Raqqa and Mosul can be enveloped. This is a wonderful word, and we haven't heard it because the envelopment is that's Cannae, right? That's Hannibal. That's the battle of annihilation, right? If you're going to envelop something, he's basically saying that Raqqa and Mosul can be enveloped, surrounded, and crushed within months. Now, Ashton Carter says within months. I'd like people to go to Twitter and say, Dear Ashton Carter, envelopment of Mosul and Raqqa, a great thing. Please make it 2 months. 2 months, not 6 months, not 4-3-2, not 4-3, but 2 months, because that would then undercut this amazing demagoguery of the Republicans, who never tell their duped base what's actually going on, that ISIS is in full retreat. And indeed, if you take a look, there's in the last couple of days, I referred to this in my other broadcast yesterday. If you take a look at the Guardian, the London Guardian has a great map where you can see, and they talk for the first time, really, about the Jarablus to Aziz and Efren corridor. And you can see that that corridor is really pretty much interdicted, so that ISIS really is in deep trouble. Now, in terms of the developments here inside the U.S. Now, here we want to talk about the First Amendment emergency, and because of legal issues, we've got to do this very carefully. We're going to take you to some growing public interest in the question of whether the First Amendment is being chilled and intimidated through various legal actions. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. We'll have to cut the Beethoven a little bit short today, much as we love Beethoven. Let's look at some of the things that are happening on this important front. First of all, the Washington Post of today, Friday, September 9th, goes into an important question. This is an editorial called Immigration Hypocrisy. Editorial page, Washington Post, Wednesday, September 7th, a couple of days ago, 2016. And this regards growing public interest in the background of the Republican nominee's family. It is growing public interest in the Trump family, or the Trumps, as we might call them. And this, of course, is inherent in the process of an election where All of these people were out campaigning in February, in March, and then all of them appeared in exceptionally high profile roles at the Republican National Convention starting last July 28th. And here, let me just read some quotes. But again, you take a look at this, right? Immigration hypocrisy. Mr. Trump has promised answers about his family's story, but has not given them. A month ago, Donald Trump, officials in his campaign assured voters that they would organize a news conference to clear up questions regarding the background of the Trump family, and in particular certain immigration events in the mid-1990s. These questions persist, writes the Washington Post. The Trump campaign has refused to answer them, and no such press conference has ever been held on this. And later on in this editorial, we read, we don't have much sympathy, in effect, they say, for Mr. Trump, I'm paraphrasing, who, having built his campaign around vilifying illegal immigrants, looks like a grand wizard of hypocrisy. And later we read, Mr. Trump's two-facedness on immigration does not end there. As a developer, he employed and may have exploited undocumented immigrants to work on at least one of his most prominent projects, Trump Tower in New York. He has attacked the United States main visa program for high-skilled workers, calling it a job killer and vowing to end it with no exceptions. But his companies have used it liberally to import hundreds of foreign workers, including fashion models. So that's Wednesday, September 7th. Now, more recently, let me see if I can get these in order for our kind readers. Let's see if we have it. Another one comes today. Here we go. The Washington Post, Friday, September 9th. And here we have an article just below the fold about the spouse of the current Republican nominee, who we read has not spoken publicly and has largely vanished from view, leaving a trail of questions and voids in her personal biography. That's coming directly from the Washington Post. And that argument mentions, well, it seems to refer to me obliquely, not by name. Take a look at that in today's Washington Post. And then we have Senator Barbara Boxer. This is extremely interesting. Here we are reading from the pages of Politico. What does Politico say? Senator Boxer, Barbara Boxer. Now, she's outgoing. She's a lame duck, I think. She's leaving. You also remember, this is a lady with some guts. She was the only one who objected to Bush taking the second term in 2004. Remember that? She did a lot of that all by herself. So Senator Barbara Boxer called on the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services to open an investigation into Donald Trump's model management company over allegations that it broke immigration laws. Boxer's request, which came in the form of a letter made public on Wednesday, following a report from Mother Jones magazine alleging that Trump model management employed foreign women who had traveled to the United States on tourist visas that did not allow them to work. Quote, I am extremely concerned about the claims levied against Trump model management and ask that you, we'll see in a minute, open an investigation into the company's employment practices. Boxer wrote in her letter to Citizenship and Immigration Services Director Leon Rodriguez. I hope you will be clear that immigration and labor violations like these, again, immigration and labor violations like these will not be tolerated. And this quote from Senator Barbara Boxer, the Republican ticket, did not immediately respond. And the allegation is that some of these models never obtained, and I'm quoting now from Politico, quote, never obtained work visas for at least some of its models, and specifically instructed them to lie on customs forms about why they were in the U.S. And some of them complained that they couldn't make any money because the Trump model management charged them for housing and other expenses. And the final sentence of this article, I'm quoting now from Politico, of working for the agency, one Canadian-born model said, it is like modern-day slavery. Now, this is just to scratch the surface here, but to get it going, get out your pocket constitution, right? Khan had one. I have one. I've had mine for 30 years. And this is now Article 1, Section 6, right? The Congress. And in Section 6, the senators and representatives, blah, 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 right? Many clauses. And for any speech or debate in either house, they shall not be questioned in any other place. Now, this is the speech and debate clause. It is a stroke of genius of the founding fathers. Why? Because they essentially put up a barrier against tyranny. Let's imagine some kind of combine of private interest so powerful, so formidable, so scary, so aggressive that it manages to shut down public debate in the private sector, right? The usual parties, newspapers, magazines, and so forth. There is still a last line of defense, which is that members of the House and members of the Senate can go to the floor of the House, the well of the House and the Senate floor, and make remarks for which they cannot be sued. In other words, if there's some tremendous imposture being inflicted on the American people, then these elected representatives of the people, go to the floor and they can reveal the truth that is being concealed. Now, as I look at Mrs. Boxer, I would say that there's a senator who has a track record of fighting back against the questionable, dubious election of Bush, the younger, George A., in 2004. Well, that was Barbara Boxer. So maybe she's planning to do something along those lines, and maybe there are some well-wishers of her to have something to say about it. We had one or two items left from today, but I think those are the main ones. Keep listening to World Crisis Radio. Get yourself a subscription to the American System Network. That's at americansystem.tv. Please give me your support. Please help me in any way you can. Volunteers can come forward. And we'll see you next week on World Crisis Radio right here